Shalom Aleichem. Hope everyone is hope everyone is doing well. Hope everyone is healthy and happy. Hope everyone is holy, staying holy. As we are 10 days out from Rosh Hashanah, from the Yom Hadin, I'd like to devote probably the next two shiurim to the theme of the Teshuva, or the theme of Din and Rosh Hashanah, just to get us in the proper frame of mind to approach HaKadosh Baruch Hu on these amazingly auspicious days. So this shiur, most of the makoros for this shiur are taken from a wonderful sefer called Hegyonei Halacha by Rav YICC Mirsky. Came out maybe 25 years ago, 30 years ago. A wonderful, wonderful sefer. And he has an article there called The Logic of Teshuva, Higayon Shel Teshuva. And most of the makorot, most of the sources from this shiur are taken from that wonderful shiur of his. So we begin with the Gemara, and this is the Aggada. This is the there are going to be a couple of other Aggadas that are not from the Talmud Bavli, but from the Yerushalmi. But we start from the Bavli. The Gemara in Maseches Pesachim on Daf Nun Daled Amud Aleph states the following. Okay, if I would ask you, I would say, what was the first thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created? What was the first thing created in the history of the world? So I think most people would say, right, Vayomer Hashem Yihi Or, Vayomer Elokim Yihi Or, Vayihi Or, that light was the first thing that was created, and that I would think, would be the correct answer, except for the Gemara in Pesachim. The Gemara says, Shiva Devarim Nivru Kodem Shenivra Ha'olam, that there were 7 things that were created prior to the creation of the world. Okay, so before that first day of creation, or the first night of creation, there were 7 things that were created prior to that. What are those things? Ve'eluhen. Then the Gemara has just a list. The Gemara afterwards is going to give is going to kind of prove, going to give some type of proof text, a pasuk that says that it was here from prior to Brias Ha'olam, to the creation of the world. But we're just going to take it and run with it. Ve'eluhen. What are the 7 things created prior to the creation of the world? Torah. Torah was created before the world. Right? The measure says Histakel ba'araisa ubara amal, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked into the Torah and then it created the world. So many of the mitzvos, right, are created because God created us and He understands us and He knows us. So therefore, many of the mitzvos are there in order to maximize our potential. So Torah was created before the world. Teshuva, repentance, was created before the world was created. Vigan Eden and the Gehenim, right? The good and the bad. Paradise and Gehenim was also created. The Kisi HaKavod, whatever exactly this means, the heavenly throne, God's throne that He has up in Shemayim, that was created before the rest of the world. Ubeis HaMikdash, and the Beis HaMikdash Shel Ma'ala, the heavenly temple, was created. Ushmo Shel Mashiach, and the name of Mashiach, the name of the Messiah, he who is going to ultimately be the Mashiach. His name was already maybe etched in stone in prior to the creation of the world. So we're not going to talk about this whole Gemara, but we're going to focus obviously on the idea of Teshuva. First thing that I think sticks out to everybody is, and that what we're going to try to unpack, is the fact that in order to have Teshuva, right, you need sin. So how could it possibly be that something that almost necessitates sin is created before the world is created? So what does that mean that Teshuva was created prior to the world? That's going to be our question. Now we're just going to give an answer to it, and then we're going to prove the case. We're going to prove the punchline of the shiur. So we as Jews, perhaps even as modern Orthodox Jews, we are very logical people. We not rationalize, but logic and logic is very, very important to us. And things that are not rational, things that are not logical, those things are sometimes very, very difficult for us. Maybe I'm speaking more personally, to digest. Mysticism, sometimes that doesn't really sit with us so well because we live lives that are dictated very much by logic. So Rav Soloveitchik, in an article called Yemei Zikaron, writes that the reason that Teshuva is created, what it means that Teshuva is created prior to the rest of the world, right? Shenivra ukodem shenivra ha'olam, is because Teshuva isn't bound by the rules of the world. Teshuva is out of this world. Teshuva is not bound. It's not guarded. It's not guided by the miskeret, by the confines of the world in which we live. We can't contemplate. It's completely irrational. It's completely illogical. If you would think of an example, right? I work in a school, so let's say you have, a person fails their first 2 tests of the semester, and then the next 8 tests, they get hundreds. Right? Their average is not an 100. Their average is not a 98. Right? You can't just ignore. You can't just erase past sins or past failures. If a person, right now we only have a 60-game, very condensed baseball season. But if in a regular year, if a person has a horrible April and they bat 123 in April, and then they bat 402 the rest of the year, they're not batting. They didn't bat 380 for the year. Right? Ultimately, you can't ever ignore. You can't ignore your April batting order. But on a much more serious level, if you have 2 people and they're very, very close and they get into a real fight, a real disagreement, one does something to the other, Reuven does something to Shimon, Rachel does something to Leah, that's really hurtful, really hurtful. And in the end, they work on themselves and they kiss and they kiss and they make up. So very often, that relationship, whatever it was before the fight, before the altercation, or before the disagreement, and before all the hurt, right? And they get back and they try to rebuild. It's not what it once was. It's very, very infrequently what it ever once was. Because though we like to say, oh, we're just going to forget the past, we don't really forget the past. And we always have that, oh, they said this about me, they didn't invite me to this, they didn't call, they texted about me to their friend, and they said this. Ultimately, that is in real life, in a real life situation, most people have very, very long memories, and most people don't forget. So if Soloveitchik says that the teva of the world is that we don't forget. That ben adam lechaver, between people, in the real world, things are never completely deleted, right? Your internet history is never completely washed away. It's always there. And ultimately, Teshuva is created. What does it mean that Teshuva was created before the rest of the world was created? What it means is that Teshuva is not really part of this world. That the world started when God created light, and Teshuva is not really bound by the rules by the rules of this world. And we see that God is the only one who understands Teshuva. If we look in the second source, we have a Yerushalmi. The Talmud Yerushalmi in Maseches Makos tells the story. Sha'ulu l'chachma. They asked chachma, they asked wisdom, they asked the concept or the philosophy of wisdom. Okay? Chote, you have a sinner. Ma'u onsho. What should be the punishment for a sinner? They're asking wisdom. According to the laws of wisdom, the Gemara answers, Chatam tirdofra, right? That they have to evil should chase after them. They need to be punished. You do something wrong, so according to the laws of wisdom, you should be punished. Sha'lu l'nevuah, they asked prophecy. Whatever exactly that means, they asked prophecy. They asked the same question. Chote mahu onsho, a chote, a sinner, what should his punishment be? Amra lahen, prophecy responded and said, Hanefesh achotas hitamus. That the Nevuah said, a nefesh, a person who sins, should die. We know all the time, right? All in Yirmiyahu and all these Nevi'im, they're constantly saying, you better repent, you better stop sinning, or else you're going to die. So according to Nevuah, also, they asked Torah, shalul Torah, tochote ma'u onsho. What is the punishment according to Torah, according to the legal system of Torah? If a person sins, what happens to them? Yavi asham v'yischaper. So a person ultimately needs to bring an asham. They need to bring a sacrifice in order to somehow, that should be their punishment, and somehow it's going to lessen their punishment. But then they said, Shalu l'Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Then they went and asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you have all three, Chachma, Nevuah, and finally Torah. According to their laws, a person who sins gets punished. A person who sins could even die, right? Shalu l'Hakadosh Baruch Hu. But then they come and ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Chote ma'u onsho amar yaseh tshuva v'yischaper. You can do tshuva and then you'll be forgiven. You'll do tshuva, you return to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you'll do better, you rectify your sin, you'll correct your sin, v'yischaper, and you will ultimately be atoned. So in the world of Chachma, in the world of Nevuah, and in the world even of Torah, Teshuva doesn't come into play. It's only in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's own world where Teshuva enters the playing field. Mesilas Yesharim, written by the Ramchal, by Rav Moshe Chaim Litzato, in his classic work of Musar, in the fourth parak, in the end of the fourth parak, he writes an amazing thing. He says that when someone sins, three things should happen according to like regular law, the regular world, regular legalities. Three things should happen. The first thing is, according to the strict judgment, the strict law of the world mamish, once a person sins, a person should be punished. Right after the sin, lightning should come, he should strike. You should turn the light on Shabbos, and all of a sudden you fall down the stairs, something chas v'shalom like that. But you sin, and then immediately you should be punished. The second thing is that v'gam sha'onish atzmo yiyeh b'charon af. Right? You should be the punishment should be commensurate with the sin. Okay, you slap, right? Ayin tachas ayin, shein tachas shein, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, commensurate with the sin. Then v'shelo yihya tikun lechet klau, and also what? It should ultimately be that you're not able to fix your sin at all. When something is broken, it is broken, right? And we know in the real world, right, when something breaks and you fix it, it's never exactly the same. So he says with the sin, we're rebelling against HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so what should happen? You shouldn't be able to fix it. Three things: be punished immediately. Second, it should be commensurate with your sin. And finally, really shouldn't be able to fix it, to correct the sin at all. And the Ramchal writes that, you know what? With HaKadosh Baruch Hu, all three don't hold it. That Teshuva comes, right? Teshuva comes, and it does away with all these three things. We describe HaKadosh Baruch Hu as an erech apayim. He's slow to anger. Meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu is very, very patient. He doesn't. He chooses not to punish us immediately, right? One clear example is that why did it take Noach 120 years to build the Teva? So all the Mefarshim say because he wanted ultimately to give the people an opportunity to do Teshuva. We're going to read on Yom Kippur that Yonah comes to the city of Nineveh after he wants to avoid the Nevuah, and he throws himself, or he tells the sailors to push him into the water, into the sea, and then he's gobbled up by this dag gadol, by this fish. The Torah never says it's a whale, right? So and then he spit out, and he said, "I'm going to go back to Nineveh, and I'm going to do what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told me, and I'm going to tell them that Od Arba'im Yom Nineveh Nehepechet, that in another 40 days, Nineveh is going to be overturned. Nineveh is going to be destroyed." Why 40 days? He wanted to give them an opportunity to do Teshuva. First of all, you should have this beautiful kavana. In the end, right, it's a weird thing. If he's saying that in the Nevuah, all he said, if you look in the Psukim, is that in 40 days, Nineveh is going to be nehepechet. This isn't part of the Shiur. This is just a beautiful nugget to think about when you're listening to the Haftorah on Yom Kippur afternoon. What does it mean that Nineveh is going to be nehepechet? Nineveh is going to be destroyed. But a Navi's words always come true. And Nineveh wasn't destroyed. That's why the pasuk says that it's going to be nehepechet. Hifuch, lehefech means the opposite, right? On Purim we say v'nahafuch, v'nahafuch, v'nahafuch. That everything was twisted upside down. So Nineveh was twisted upside down. Nineveh, an evil city, a city of evildoers, of Rishon that are sinning and stealing. The pasuk says, what happens? Nineveh is turned upside down because Nineveh does tshuva. So really, the Nevuah, what Yonah said, is 100% true. In 40 days, probably even in less than 40 days, they corrected their sins. But that's just an example, just like Noach is an example of giving people time to do tshuva, right? That he doesn't punish them immediately. He gives them time, right? Now, very often in the real world, right, we give someone time. We don't punish immediately because we have to investigate, right? We don't really know what happened, right? We have to ask questions. We have to see what went on. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need that. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't, when he chooses not to punish immediately, it's a tremendous, tremendous chesed. Second, HaKadosh Baruch Hu very rarely, if ever, does he punish commensurate with the sin, because he's a parent. And this is another, we're going to say Avinu Malkeinu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is our Av, he's our parent, right? And we all know, how often as a parent do we punish our children with what they should get? You can give so much attitude, and they can be so disrespectful, right? And what do? Send them to their room. We don't let them go out on a Saturday night. We take away electronics. What do? They were so disrespectful. They were so rude, right? And the same thing with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we're disrespectful to him, we don't have kavanah davening, or we do some type of aveira, right? It's almost like a rebellion. He gives us everything, right? Imagine a kid. Imagine they're rude to us, right? Imagine, okay? They're rude to us, and we give them everything. And we have chesed. That's the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu deals with us, right? He never punishes. We never really get what we're supposed to get in the world of punishment. And lastly, he gives us the opportunity to do tshuva. He gives us the opportunity to come together. He needs to rectify, and to reconnect. More important than fixing the sin is ultimately rebuilding the relationship. That's the ultimate thing. And the Mesilas Yesharim really says that tshuva is the greatest, after life, tshuva is really the greatest chesed that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does for us. Allows us to fall and then to regain our momentum and to build. There's another amazing story in the Yerushalmi. There was an evil king named Menashe. So when you know that a person's name is Menashe, that's from Ephraim and Menashe. But there was an evil king that's spoken about in Sefer Malachim. Menashe was his name. His father, if you remember, there's a story in the Gemara in Brachos. The Gemara in Brachos tells the story of Menashe's father, Chizkiyahu, who was also a king. And Chizkiyahu saw that he was going to have a horrible child. And what did he do? He didn't want to have children. He didn't want to say, why am I going to have children? Why am I going to bring a child into the world who's going to be a destructive person, who's going to be a person he's going to be a chote umachti. He's a chote, he's a sinner. Umachti is going to force other people to sin. He brought Avodah Zarah into the Beis HaMikdash. I think he killed his grandfather. And all of a sudden, when Chizkiyahu gets musar, he gets scolded by one of the Nevi'im, who ultimately come and say, "What are you talking about? You're not God. Everyone has free choice. You have to have children because it's up to everybody. You can't say, oh, I think that my kid's going to be bad, so I can't have children." He has Menashe. He's right. Menashe is a horrific person. And what happens? Menashe he was one of the worst sins. I think the Mishnah in the beginning of the 10th parak of Sanhedrin says Menashe is one of the people that are not going to be allowed to do tshuva. I think one of them is Menashe. But the story goes in the fourth of our sources. So at the end of his life, he was being attacked by fire. There was fire that was surrounding him. And Kevan Sherash et Sarasu Tsara. Once he saw that things were getting so bad, he was in such a horrible situation. What did he do? Lo hiniach avodah zarah ba'olam shelo hazechira shelo vizkira. Sorry, he worshipped every avodah zarah. Every avodah zarah known to man or known to Menashe, he worshipped. Kevan shelo hoi alo klum. Once none of them were answering him. It wasn't helpful. He was still suffering. Amar, he said, Zachar ani, I remember, Shaya avi mikre es oti es haposik hazeh. Whenever my father would get in a bind, whenever anything bad would be happening, I remember my father stating this pasuk in the shul, and then he quotes the pasuk, whenever anything bad happens to you. And the end of the pasuk is V'shavta ad Hashem lokecha v'shemata. You should return to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right here, really, there's no atheist in a foxhole. V'shavta ad Hashem lokecha. You should return to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, your God, v'shemata b'kolo, and He will listen to you. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a merciful God. He will not destroy you. V'lo yishkach et brit avotecha asher nishbah lehem. Hari ani kore oto. Right, so he says, I'm going to read this pasuk that I remember that my father used to say. I'm going to read this pasuk. I have no other choice. So I'm going to read the pasuk. Ima oneoti. If God answers me, mutav, awesome, great, wonderful. V'im lav, but if He doesn't, hakol ap yashavin. You know what I'll know? If He doesn't answer me and He doesn't help me at this point, this juncture, this precarious situation, I'm going to know that kol ap yashavin, all the faces, all the gods are all equal. Meaning, just like this tree doesn't have any power, and this statue doesn't have any power, so too HaKadosh Baruch Hu Chas v'Shalom also doesn't have any power. Now what happens? So he's davening to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's about to be consumed by this fire. He calls out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and look at the imagery. The imagery is so beautiful. The angels, at this time that he's davening, they are mistamin es achalonos. They're trying to close the windows, whatever exactly that means in Shemayim. But his tefillah is coming up to Shemayim. It's going to enter through the windows that are in Shemayim, and they are trying to push down and keep the windows closed. Why? Shelo talat tefillah so shemanasha. So that Menashe's tefillah can't enter, it can't come up in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The malachim are saying to God, Ribono Shalom, God, Adam she'avod avodah zarah v'hem yitzelem beheichel, a man who worshipped avodah zarah v'hem yitzelem beheichel, and he brought an idol into the heichel. Mikabel b'tshuva, you're going to accept his tshuva? Amar lehen, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, Im eini mikabel b'tshuva, if I don't accept Menashe's tshuva, Hare ani noel et had. Oh my God! Hare ani noel et hadelet bifnei kol balei tshuva. Rather, what? If I don't allow Menashes, then I know that there's a gvul, there's a border, there's a level that you can't pass, right? And people are going to say, oh, maybe I'm just as bad as Menashe. I'm not going to even do tshuva. No, I'm going to accept his tshuva. Why? I can't noel et hadelet, lock the door, close the door. I can't lock the door. Why? In front of all the balei tshuva, because then people are going to say, then you know what? There is a point of no return. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you can never say there's a point of no return. Ma asalo HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? Remember, the angels are closing the windows. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, chater lo chatira. He dug like under the ground. Mitachat kisei hakavod. He went underground, under the kisei hakavod, which was also created before the rest of the world. V'shama tchinaso. And he heard the tchin, he heard the supplication, the tefillah, right, of Menashe. But you hear here, what do you see here? Even the angels can't comprehend tshuva, right? The nevuah can't comprehend tshuva. The wisdom can't. The Torah can't, right? The Torah can't. And here we have even the angels are unable. Why? Because tshuva is out of the world. Tshuva is completely illogical. It's completely irrational. What does that force us to do? It forces us to sometimes say, no. Even though I sinned, even though I haven't davened with a minion, even though I haven't done chesed, even though I ate non-kosher, whatever the sin is that you are doing, that you are struggling with, that you can't break that habit and you can't get yourself out of it, and you look at God and you say, He's never going to accept my tshuva. When you say HaKadosh Baruch Hu is never going to accept your tshuva, you're thinking in your own rational world, your own logical psyche. Why? Because if you would kind of, let's say, be mean, or you would kind of offend somebody else, or someone would offend you so many times, you wouldn't accept their tshuva. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu would. There's an amazing story I heard. I have a friend who, I only have one friend now. Thank God I have many friends. I have a friend who lives right now in New Jersey. He went to Brandeis University. And when he was in Brandeis, he got, I think, an extra master's in Jewish history, and somehow, a regular guy, went to regular day school, the day school system. He built up a relationship with the Boston Rebbe. Somehow he got connected with the Boston Rebbe, and I don't know what the issue was, but one time he went to the Rebbe. He would go to the Rebbe many times, but I guess he was working through a certain issue that the Rebbe had, that he had, and he went to the Rebbe and he asked. He laid it all out online. It was an open book. He told the Rebbe everything, and then he was struggling with whatever he was struggling, and the Rebbe said in Yiddish, and I don't know the Yiddish. He said, "The Eibishter," meaning God, the Eibishter doesn't laugh. He says he didn't understand. He goes, "What? What?" He said again, "The Eibishter doesn't laugh," and he's like, "What?" The Eibishter doesn't laugh. And he laughed. Sometimes after the third, fourth time, you don't want to ask. You feel like there's something wrong with you that you don't understand it. He leaves. He asks the Rebbe's son, who's the Rebbe's Gabbai, he said, "Your father said the Eibishter doesn't laugh. What in the world does that mean?" So his father said, "Oh, my father loves to say that. We in our world, let's say someone asks me for a loan, and they ask me for a loan for $500, and I give them a loan. Okay, they don't pay me back. I'll pay you back, and the whole story is they don't pay me back. 6 months later, I need like just $300, right? So okay, fine. I'm a nice guy. I'll try to give the guy money if I have, right? Doesn't pay me back. A third time, the fourth. There's going to come a time. The third time, the fourth time, I'm going to laugh in his face. I'm not giving the guy. He's not going to pay me back. He lost all his credibility with me. I am going to laugh in his face. But we say, you know what? This year, you know what? This year I'm going to learn every day. I'm going to daven every day. I'm going to wear tzitzis every day. I'm going to keep Shabbos. You know, I'm going to, whatever it is that I'm doing. Right? And we come back again and again and again, year in and year out. And you know what? If it was us, we would laugh at us. We would say, Molly, he's not going to do it. He always says he's not going to do it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibishter, doesn't laugh. We'll conclude with the last couple of things. The Noda of Yehuda Recheskel Landau was asked a question. He was asked that there was this terrible, crazy case where a guy, very sadly, he was married. He was cheating on his wife. He had a relationship with a married woman, with another married woman for 3 years, and then all of a sudden he got much more religious and he cared about Judaism and started davening and started learning, and he became a completely different person. So he wanted to know whether he needed to go and tell that husband, okay, to tell the husband what was going on. Why? Because a woman who is not loyal to her husband is not allowed to be, that man is not allowed to be with her. So this guy now got from, and his woman, and this wife that this woman that he cheated with, right? She's not really allowed to be with the husband. So does he have to tell her? So that's a crazy question, right? So that was the first part of it. So the Noda Yehuda has a long answer about that and responds to that. Then he says, how do I do tshuva for an aveira like that? How do I do tshuva for adultery? No one knows about it. I'm writing to you about it. Maybe someone will know about it soon, but no one knows. How do I do tshuva? And he asks a question, and he ultimately says, should I fast a lot? Should I, say billions of prakim of Tehillim? How do I really do tshuva? Right? So he asks, right? So he answers that you don't need to just fast a million times. It's all balev. That tshuva is really balev. But then the Noda of Yehuda in his tshuva pivots a little bit, and he asks a different question. He says that does tshuva work in our world? Meaning, let's say in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, let's say that we had a real Beis Din, you have the Sanhedrin, okay? And now a person is mechalel Shabbos, or a person commits adultery, or a person does another aveira where they ultimately where the Beis Din can give them capital punishment, okay? Right? I was warned by 2 witnesses that I should not, under no circumstances, be mechalel Shabbos. And what happens? I am Mechal Shabbos. I just didn't care. I needed to watch the Laker game. I needed to do whatever. 2 people warned me. I knew what I was doing. I knew I would ultimately get killed. But the Lakers are too important to me, so I need to. So I turned it on. Let's say after that moment, that was a Shabbos, September 1st. Okay, September 2nd. All of a sudden, I have like this religious revival. And all of a sudden, I have this religious awakening, and all of a sudden, I become the greatest Baal Tshuva in the world. This story happened to me when I was 18. All of a sudden, I started learning like crazy. Now I'm 38 years old, and I'm a tremendous Rosh Hashiva, biggest Rosh Hashiva in the world, right? And what happens? Finally, the witnesses, when I was 18, they come to Beis Din, they get their act together, right? There's no statute of limitations, let's say, and they hear the case. And they bring the case to the Beis Din. Beis Din says, he's got to get killed. He's got to get killed. He was Mechal Shabbos in front of witnesses. He was warned. He knew what he was doing. He was told a punishment. I don't care that he's Rosh Hashiva. So the Noda Yehuda asks, why is it that tshuva doesn't work? Why is it that in the real world, in Beis Din, tshuva doesn't play a role? You can't come to Beis Din and say, oh, I'm a totally changed man. I'm totally different. That guy, imagine the case. The case is, a guy's Mechal Shabbos when he's 18. In this world, he's going to get killed. In the next world, he could be sitting next to Moshe Rabbeinu in Gan Eden. That's a crazy thing, because he really did tshuva. So why is it that tshuva doesn't work? So here, the Noda B'Yehuda writes that if tshuva worked, if a race, the Beis Din shel mata, okay, if the worldly Beis Din, the worldly court would accept tshuva, the whole system of punishments would fall by the wayside. Why? Because everybody would be coming to the Beis Din saying, I did tshuva. I feel really, really bad. I'm changing my life. I'm never going to Mechal Shabbos again. I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to do that. Right? You always have a get out of jail free card. It doesn't work. So how is society going to function? You're never going to be able to prevent any sin. I can do what I want. I'm going to kill this guy. It's going to be anarchy. Right? It's going to be anarchy. I'm going to kill this person. Then I'm going to come to the Beis Din and say, oh, you know what? I did tshuva. There's no deterrent. You're not going to hold people back. So that's the answer of the Noda B'Yehuda, the Chidah. Reb Chaim Yosef David Azulai, who was a prolific writer, they say that he wrote a sefer for every year of his life. Obviously, he wasn't that precocious, so it must be either that he didn't write for every single year, or later on he wrote more than one sefer per year. So his answer is probably the answer that I think that most would say, is that how do we know that the tshuva is real, right? God knows if we are sincere, if we're authentic, if we're genuine. But a regular Beis Din, judges, the jury, they don't know if we're authentic. So therefore, just the way of the world, you can't, according to the Chidah, we don't know. So therefore, we're gonna completely ignore it. Doesn't matter. Pay us a shtreimel. You can look like the greatest Rebbe in the world, and we still don't know what really is going on balev. So tshuva in this world doesn't work either. The first answer, because the whole system will fall apart. It'll be anarchy. There'll be no deterrence for sin. That's the answer of the Noda B'Yehuda. The Chidah says more simply, we just don't know that, we can't believe his tshuva necessarily. And third is ultimately that, just like police, right? Just like police, you don't get rewarded for I think there's an insurance company that has a commercial, right? That we will reward if you stay, for a good driving record. But what's the job of the police? The police is just to punish, just to safety and security, right? They are going to give you a ticket if you run the red, but they're not going to reward you. They're not going to reward you if you stop at every word. There's a different function, right? The Beis Din shel mata, this world's court, their job is really to keep order and to make sure people don't get hurt, safety and security. And their job mostly is to punish wrongdoers and to beat out sin, right? And the Beis Din shel ma'ala, that's the true justice system. That's the real justice system, right? Where I get what I deserve. It could be possible that in this world I got away with many sins, and no one knew it, and I did this privately, and no one knows, and everyone treats me like I'm the biggest tzaddik in the world. But behind closed doors, I'm not really that way, right? Guess what? In the Beis Din shel ma'ala, I'm going to get what's really deserving, and vice versa works as well. So the function of the Beis Din shel mata and the function of the Beis Din shel ma'ala are different. This world is safety and security, just to ward off criminals and to make sure everyone is, everyone's abiding or are law-abiding citizens. But then your real justice, your real reward, or your punishment will happen in the next world. And I think you could also say, right? I think you could also say that the fourth answer is what we've been saying the whole time, is ultimately tshuva by a human court can't be accepted. Why? Not because they don't necessarily understand. People can't really comprehend tshuva. It's beyond them. It's illogical and irrational, and it's out of this world. And ultimately, we have to live our lives defined by clear laws. It's almost too difficult for understand. It's completely out of our orbit. It's not really on our playing field. And ultimately, that's how we should approach tshuva. Once again, as I said earlier, and I'll close with this, that sometimes a person stunts their own growth because they really don't believe in the power of tshuva, or that tshuva really, really exists. Perhaps it's because we're very logical, rational people. If something doesn't make sense in this world, how can I approach it? How can I bring it into my own world and really do real, sincere tshuva, where I really believe that, you know what? My April batting average is completely wiped away. That text that I sent about my friend is completely wiped away. Those two tests that I didn't do well, the teacher really does, right? HaKadosh Baruch Hu really does drop the lowest grade. And ultimately, we should come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and we should make a plan. These are my major averos, and this is going to be how I'm going to do tshuva. This is how I'm going to ultimately ask for forgiveness, but then chart a new path on how to grow and how to rectify those sins and renew my relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu with more vitality and with more enthusiasm and passion. And we should all be zocha to do real tshuva. Tshuva that builds a person and renews and reinvigorates their relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Have a great week.